guys, it's Kelly here again and welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to my 6-month book wrap-up. I did my last wrap-up back in June, and because I don't read quite as many books as other booktubers, I thought that doing a monthly wrap-up just didn't make sense to me because sometimes I don't even read a single book in a month, so I thought I would do it in 6 months. However, these videos turn out really long and I have quite a few books to talk about, so I think I'm going to do it every 3 months from now on, just so I can keep them a little bit more shorter, I guess. But yeah, hopefully it's not too long, and if you want to skip to specific books that you want to hear my opinion about, I will mark the chapters and I will also have the time stamps down in the description bar down below. That said, let's get into the books that I read from the months of June to November. December is going to be, I guess, in my next wrap-up because technically it hasn't started, but I wanted to get a jump start on the videos. Also, hopefully you can hear me alright because my microphone is down on a chair next to me and I really don't know how well it's going to pick up on my voice, but hopefully it's fine. The first couple of books that I have to talk about, I listened to as audiobooks because I was in a bit of a slump and I wasn't reading physically, but I was listening to some audiobooks. So in the month of June, I listened to Get a Life, Chloe Brown, which I like to say is part of my romance outreach program. I do not read romance whatsoever, and I was really trying to dip my toes into genres that are different than what I usually read because I usually read mostly sci-fi and fantasy. And even if I read like a romance or something else, it always has to have some kind of sci-fi or fantasy element in it. So I decided to read Get a Life, Chloe Brown is a romance and kind of dip my toes into romance. This was a 3-star read for me. Not for me, obviously, because it's a romance, but also like in terms of romance, I didn't really enjoy it quite as much as everybody here on YouTube seems to love it, so it's going to be a bit of an unpopular opinion. So we follow Chloe and Red. Chloe has a chronic illness that kind of stops her from experiencing a life normally and having a normal social life, so she doesn't go out much, she doesn't do much. And Red is a artist who is also the building manager in Chloe's building, and he has gotten out of a abusive relationship. And we follow them as they kind of connect, they become friends, and Chloe helps Red set up his portfolio and his website, while Red helps Chloe experience more in life. They start developing feelings for each other, they engage into a relationship, and that's basically what the book is about. It has some good elements, and it was interesting overall, excluding the smut scenes, which were totally not for me. Now I know that makes me extremely uncomfortable. But excluding that, the romance in itself, you had the two characters kind of just basically read each other's minds, and I didn't think that that was very realistic. I know that some people are more intuitive, but they literally knew everything about the other person without them ever elaborating, and that kind of felt a little bit unrealistic because as intuitive as people can be, they can't always guess 100% everything that happened into your life. So yeah, not a fan of that. There are a lot of people who think that there was like a conflict towards the end that was completely unnecessary. And again, an unpopular opinion here, but I think it was completely necessary, and it actually has to be, for me at least, more of the book because we finally get the two characters to do something wrong and show that they're struggling with certain things. It took them like 1 page to reconcile and say sorry, and everything was fine. They didn't even talk about it, so I just no. Sorry, but no. Overall though, if you like romance, this is highly acclaimed here, so you might give it a shot. You might enjoy it. Next up, I listened to Raybearer, which was a 5-star read for me. I listened to it as an audiobook, and it is a fantasy story. I think it's YA. Although it didn't, yeah, I think it's YA. I loved almost everything about this book. I love the dynamics. I love the characters. I love their relationships. I love the magic system. It was incredibly interesting. I love the world and kind of the political system as well, which is weird for me because I don't typically get into politics and I don't especially enjoy it in my fantasy books. But this one was so well made, and it makes you want to read and know more. We follow Terasai, who is a young girl grown up with her mother in a palace. She was sheltered from the whole world, and She doesn't know much about it. She only has her tutors and maids and people who take care of her to contact, to connect with. And she also has a very special ability. Whenever she touches someone or something, she can see its memories, or in some cases even extract them. Because of that ability, the servants are all afraid of her. They have been instructed by her mother to not touch her ever. Yeah, she basically grows up as a little kid all alone, no contact with her mother, with the outside world, and also no physical contact as well. So she is very love deprived. And one day when she's a little bit older, she is sent by her mother on a special mission where she needs to become one of the Emperor's council members and kind of, I don't even want to say because I don't want to spoil it, but just infiltrate his council members. And I love this book so much. I loved the characters. I loved the political system even. I loved the relationships. There were a few points in the book where it kind of dragged a little bit, but being as it's a fantasy and I think it's a pretty high fantasy as well, it's kind of natural. So the council members are 11 people, each representing a different realm, who kind of form a mental bond with the Emperor, and with each council member that the Emperor gains, he also gains invulnerability. And if, for instance, if from one kingdom he gets a council member, the Emperor becomes immune to fire. If he gains from another kingdom a council member, I am not explaining that right, but the second council member that he gets from a different kingdom, the Emperor becomes immune to poison. And so in the end, when he forms his entire council, he is immune to all sorts of death except old age. We follow Tarisai as she gets out of her mother's palace and goes into the children's palace, where she is studying with other children who are kind of candidates for council members from different realms. And we follow her journey from there to when she actually becomes a council member. And it is so interesting. I cannot recommend it enough if you want a good fantasy with even feminist vibes and feminist undertones. Even though it wasn't too prominent, it didn't annoy me because I do get annoyed by the overly PC stuff, but this wasn't like that. So I quite enjoy it, and I think you would as well. If you've read Children of Blood and Bone and if you enjoyed it, I think you would really enjoy this one as well. Probably even more, because I think I enjoyed it even more. Next up, I listened to The Memory Thief, and this was a DNF for me, unfortunately. I thought it sounded interesting. It's about a girl who grew up kind of poor, taking care of her mother. She has, again, special ability, something connected to memories again. I think she can see into people's memories. It wasn't exactly like in the Raybearer, but it was, again, connected to memories. And I thought it sounded interesting, but as I got into it, I listened to, I think, maybe 30% of the book. And it just got so juvenile that I couldn't take it. And also the audiobook narrator wasn't great. No shade to her. She was really trying. You can tell that she was trying, but it just felt very low quality. And the whole plot was very obvious from the beginning. She has to save her mother, and she has to do some questionable things in order to save her. So she embarks on a journey, and she meets a guy who's gonna come be her companion, and obviously there's a romance there. It just felt a little been there, done that, so I DNF'd it. Next up, I read On Cats by Charles Bukowski, and I wanted to get a little bit of a sense of his writing style, and obviously this book, it has cats, so it's perfect for me. And if I'd known that the book itself had poems and photographs of his cats, I would definitely rather read it physically, because I went to it audio as an audiobook, and that was a mistake. That said, it was still a good book. I wanted to kind of get a feel for his writing, see if I like it or not, because I have Post Office on my bookshelf, and I have been scared to read it. So I thought that reading something about cats, because I love cats, would be good for me and a good way to start. I don't think it was, because it was just so short and it was so different. It wasn't like a full book. It was more, there's an essay, then some thoughts, then a poem, and it was kind of a collection of thoughts rather than a book. So I didn't get 100% of what I wanted to from him and see if I like him or not. So I guess I will have to try with something else. But this one was a 3-star for me, and I enjoyed it. I would consider getting it as a physical book just so I could see the pictures of his kids. Next up, I finally have a physical book that I read, which is Recursion by Blake Crouch. And as you can see, this is the Pokerian cover. I love this cover, by the way. So this one was another 5-star read for me. I finally got some 5-star reads this year. And I read Dark Matter, I think, last year. I listened to it as an audiobook, and I really enjoyed it and I really loved it. And now I decided to pick up Recursion, which I loved even more. You're following a New York detective who is investigating these cases of FMS, which is a false memory syndrome. And there are people all over the city and all over the world, but I think it starts off with just the city, who wake up one day and suddenly their life is not their life. They remember being married and having a child, but then they wake up one day and they're not married no longer. Their child doesn't exist. So he's investigating what this is, how exactly is it spreading, and what is causing it. On the other hand, we follow Helena, who is a neuroscientist trying to develop a special technology for people with Alzheimer's, and she is trying to help her mother because her mother is suffering from Alzheimer's, and she wants to help her cure it, or at least help her remember certain things. This one, it follows a lot of things. There's a lot of things that happen. It's jam-packed with action and technology, so if you're not a fan of that, I don't know if you enjoyed this, but if you love multiverses, if you love multiple timelines, if you love thoughts, I guess, because there are theories, I believe, about the memory and about how time moves, I definitely recommend it. I loved this book so much. There were a few moments when I thought, okay, we're coming towards the end, and then I look and I'm at the 60% mark. So again, it's jam-packed with dynamic and intriguing stuff. Totally recommend. Next up, I read Kindred from Octavia E. Butler, and this is about Dana, who is a Black woman in the 80s. I believe she lived with her husband, and she is one day thrusted 150 years back into the past to save a little boy called Rufus. So being a Black woman in the 1800s is definitely not a good thing for her. She has to keep Rufus safe. She has to help him, and in reality, it turns out that he's also a slave owner or part of the family of slave owners. So we experience a lot of racism and a lot of horrible things, and we kind of follow her as she, I guess, gets a feel of the whole time period, how people were thinking back then, and what it took to survive and to keep on living. So obviously a heavy book, but definitely worth the read. Next up, I read a graphic novel, which was Middlewest Volume 1, and I read Chapter 1 a few months back. I don't know if it was a year, maybe a year back, and I gotta say this is probably one of my favorite graphic novels at this time. I love the art style, I love the story, I just love everything about it, and I can't wait to get my hands on all the other volumes. I think there are only 6, so I should. So we follow Abel, who is growing up in a small town with his abusive father. His mother has left, and one day he does a few things wrong. His father gets very angry and very nasty with him, and he suddenly turns into a giant tornado monster. So Abel has to flee in order to save himself, and that's basically it. You follow Abel as he's trying to escape his dad, and then I think you follow his dad trying to find Abel as well, because it's not in this volume, but I'm guessing that's what's gonna happen. So Abel's trying to escape, and he is also with his friend. I don't know if you can see him, but there's a talking fox, which I didn't expect, and it was so cute. This world, all in all, is very interesting. I can't say that it's exactly fantasy, because there's a lot of magic and magical elements, but also there's robots, and there are these weird purple and pink containers on top with some weird juice, which I think they use for electricity. So yeah, the world is very weird. I don't understand it, but I would love to. So if you're looking for a good graphic novel, I definitely recommend this one. As I said, one of the, if not the prettiest one that I have. Just the art style is completely up my alley, and if you want to see more close-ups of it, I will have a video where I read this one and another few graphic novels up in, I don't know, sometime maybe. Next up, I read another graphic novel, which was Harleen, Volume 1, and this is the story of how Harleen Quinzel becomes Harley Quinn. And this I really wanted to read because I love Harley Quinn, and I wanted to know more about her story, or at least this particular take on her story, and it's good. Honestly, it's a little bit juvenile in terms of writing, and the dialogue is a little weird, but the art style is beautiful, and it is exactly what you expect from a Harley Quinn novel. So yeah, if you like that, I would recommend. Next up, I read a manga, and it has been a hot minute since I read any manga, but I fell in love with some of the art style because I found some pictures on Pinterest and decided to give it a go. So it is a romance, and it's called Living no Matsunaga-san. And some people translate it as Living Room Matsunaga or Living with Matsunaga-san. I really don't know exactly how to translate it because it is quite literally Living no Matsunaga-san. So if you know Japanese, please let us know how exactly you would translate it because I am stupid. So as I said, this is a romance, and we're following Miku, who is 16, 17 years old, and she, due to some family issues, she has to move in with her uncle in a shared house. So it's a big house, and there are 7 people, I think, there who each share a room. So she has to move there so that she's not in the way for her family who are trying to take care of her grandma. She moves in. There's Matsunaga-san, who is a graphic designer. He's a lot older than her. He's 27. Start developing feelings for each other, and it is adorable. I mean, it's just cute. Absolutely everything that I hate in romance novels, for instance, stupid characters, I actually enjoy in manga romances because, I don't know, I guess I'm just a visual person. I prefer seeing them, faces, interactions and stuff rather than reading about it. So yeah, if you are an avid romance reader, I don't know if you enjoy this, but if you're an avid romance shoujo manga reader, I definitely think you will enjoy this. It was adorable. There's my favorite character, who is a cat with the funniest faces ever, and I really enjoyed it, and I love every second of it. It is a bit iffy in terms of their relationship because they have a big age gap, and it's not that big, but when you're 17 and your love interest is 27, it feels a little bit iffy. As long as you ignore that, at the beginning it was really hard to ignore that, so I was on the edge of DNFing it. But when I just kind of got into the story, it grew on me. But yeah, I could just kind of ignore it and keep on reading because it was cute and nicely drawn. And there was a cat. Next up, I listened to I Am Legend, and this was a 3.25, 3.5 read for me. I think I've seen the movie, but now that I've read the book, I'm not so sure I've seen the movie. So I've heard one of you guys commented on one of my previous videos that they're completely different, and I agree. From what I remember from the movie, they are completely different. So this is a post-apocalyptic book, and we're following our main character who is living in a world and trying to survive in a world where there are these humans have turned into these zombie/vampire monster creatures. And it started off like a pandemic. So all of humanity is kind of in this state now. They're zombie vampire monsters, and he's, as far as we can tell, the only surviving human. He is trying to get through each day and just trying not to completely fall into despair. This is quite an old book. I didn't realize it until I finished it, but it definitely doesn't feel like it was written in the 60s, I think it was written. And it's deep in a very unexpected way because we get to see the main character experience a lot of grief and a lot of loneliness, and it's just crushing, and he's fighting with a lot of inner demons as well as the outer monsters. So it's a little heavy and it clutches your heart a little bit, but it was a good book. I would definitely recommend reading the book rather than watching the movie, because if I'm correct about what I'm remembering, it's kind of soulless, and the book is all soul, so definitely recommend that one. Next up, I listened to another audiobook, which was Anxious People by Frederick Backman. And I heard that this was going to be a Netflix TV series, so I wanted to see what it was about. And this would be the second time actually, that I am going to be reading a book before watching the show or movie. So I'm very proud of myself. Anxious People is a very unique and quirky story about a bank robber who attempts robbing a bank, but everything goes wrong. And when the police come, he is forced to flee in the nearest building, where conveniently or not, there's an open house. So he rushes into the open apartment, I guess, and the people there who are potential buyers see the gun. Ultimately, they assume they're being robbed or held hostage. So from a bank robbery gone wrong, it turns to a accidental hostage situation. We start the book off with the police officers who are conducting interviews, and they don't know what happened, who was the bank robber, and what exactly did he manage to escape, or if he is one of the people they're interviewed. So it's a very interesting take on a bank robbery. There's also a lot of deep subjects that are discussed in the show. In the book. There are a lot of deep subjects that are discussed in the book. For instance, suicide is a more prominent topic as well. And even though it's heavy, it discusses heavy subjects, but it does it in a very quirky and kind of funny way. So it doesn't feel too heavy, and it's kind of easy to read. But also there are a few moments where the characters seem very more like caricatures than characters, so it's a little ridiculous at times. But if you're prepared for that, because I wasn't prepared for that, but if you're prepared for that, then you won't have a problem with it. And the last book I'm going to be talking about is Murder in Mesopatamia by Agatha Christie, and this is the first ever Agatha Christie book that I've ever read. It was a recommendation by a friend of mine, and she loves reading crime thrillers. I lost the word there for a second. She loves reading Agatha Christie and crime thrillers, and she really wanted to discuss this book with someone, so she recommended that I read it, and we read it together and we discussed it. And I loved it. This was an awesome book. There's an archaeological team that ventures out into Mesopotamia. They stay there and with some of their wives, and there's a murder that happens. So investigator Poirot comes to figure out what was going on and figure out who the murderer is and what exactly happened. So you follow a lot of different characters. It was a little confusing at times, especially because I listened to it as an audiobook. And there were these descriptions of the house, which if you don't have the physical book and the map in the physical book, you kind of get confused in the beginning. And there's also a lot of characters, and some of them kind of mush together, but all in all, towards the end, you kind of have a clear idea of what was going on. And I just really, really liked the whole mystery. I loved the way it was told, such beautiful writing. And also the audiobook narrator was amazing. She did these amazing accents, and you could always tell who's the character that is speaking. So if you want to go the audiobook way, I would also recommend that. It was a very interesting read, and I would definitely consider picking something else from Agatha Christie as well. So that's it from me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I would love to hear your opinions if you've read any of the books that I mentioned in this video, or if you want to read, or if you have any other recommendations that you have for books that I should read. So thank you guys so much for watching. Comment, like, and subscribe if you like what you see and would like to see more, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!